Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's Lloyd De Jong, and I'm back here with TDK. Today, we are going to be discussing the reliability, or shall I say, the unreliability of the Hadiths and the Sirah, or the biographies of Mohammed. And these are sources that accompany the Quran, which are considered to be authoritative and reliable in Islam, from which we get a lot of critical detail that is actually missing in the Quran. So we're going to discuss that. We're going to look at Western as well as Muslim scholars commenting on the unreliability and unbelievability of these sources. So welcome, TDK. Great to have you today.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to be here and to explore Islam and their reliable sources. Yeah, so yeah, I'm excited to get into this.
Right. Yeah. And thanks for joining me for the last stream that we did. That was really, really fascinating. Appreciate your support
Yeah,
and discussion on the moon, the the Allah being a pagan moon god thesis of Robert Morey. That I
yeah.
think that's a really important topic, and we'll explore that again later this week. Grüße aus Stuttgart. Hallo Hanso. Ja, Grüße aus Warschau. Gut, dich hier zu haben. Und hallo. Kappa Soup, good afternoon. Tom Yokai, good afternoon. Carmel, welcome. Small clips. Hey, Connie. I sent you a message, Connie, and I sent you an invite. We've got a stream coming up in 2 weeks with Eric, so you've got the invite. So yeah, drop me a note on Skype, and we will talk. I saw Alonzo Harris in Dean responds using Alonzo Harris. Yeah. Alonzo Harris. That's a legend in her own mind. Okay, guys. So let's just dive right into this topic. And any comment, any thought you want to throw in before we begin, TDK?
No, that's okay. Could get into it.
Okay, so briefly, I just want to give a small definition to the sirah because most of us know what the hadiths are, and I will define these again later. But just to start off, I want to briefly define the sirah. The sirah, there's numerous spellings. This refers to biographical literature about Muhammad's life. Think of it as the Gospels of Muhammad. It encompasses all aspects of his life and, very importantly, including his wars and military campaigns, because the context is actually the wars of Muhammad. And don't forget, Muslims have to follow the example of the Prophet. And here we have his political and military campaigns. Wars, the Ghazawat, right? These are specifically the military expeditions and battles that Muhammad participated in or ordered. They are a significant and important part of the Sirah literature. The Sirah, the biography, includes detailed accounts of his wars and military expeditions, right? They are part of his prophetic mission and leadership. Hence, you have, again, as I've posted on my community tab, the top 20 religious terrorist organizations. Every single one is a Muslim organization. I stopped at the top 20. So there's a reason for that, because Muhammad was a warlord. Muhammad used terror. So Ibn Ishaq's original work and Ibn Hisham's later abridgment, both titled Sirat Rasulallah, the life of the Messenger of Allah, have extensive information about Muhammad's military campaigns. Now, here on the left, I have the Hidayah, Volume 2. This is the Hanafi school of fiqh. This is the jewel in the crown of the Hanafi school of fiqh, their Sharia, their fiqh manuals, right? Their legal manual. And this is on Al-Sayyir, or the institutes. This is the word sirah here, for those of us who are unfamiliar with what that means. Effectively, siyir is the plural of sirat, which in its primitive sense signifies regulation. So Muslims understand Muhammad's example as law, as regulation, as regulations, legal regulations, mandates, right? And Sayyir, in the language of the law, more especially applies to the institutes of the Prophet in his wars. So hence, Islam and terror, Islam and conquest. You can see on the manner of waging war. This is part of the instructions, the holy religious instructions of Islam, the manner of waging war, of plunder and the division thereof. TDK, tell me, plunder, isn't this something we associate with religion, or is it something we associate with pirates?
Yeah, pirates, and Mohammed was in connection with pirates, those who steal and do all this stuff. And definitely, as you said, like, yeah, he was victorious by terror, as he himself said.
Indeed. Yeah. So, okay. Now, with that out the way, let's dive into this particular discussion. So, this particular presentation I actually got from Mal of Islamic Origins just under a year ago. Gave it to me in August, late August last year, and I stumbled across it in my collection, and I thought, hey, let me start working on this, adapting it. So, thank you to Mal for this. And so, we're going to look at the Sirah and Hadiths, and we're going to critically examine them. We're going to look at the reliability of the sources. Spoiler, they're not reliable. We're going to look at observations on the content of the Sirah as well as the Hadiths. Right, we're going to do about 25 slides today. So, just strange coincidence. Evidence that could have proved, supposed earlier documents that could have proved that the histories of the biographies of Muhammad, of Islam, of the founding of Islam, weren't preserved. They all disappeared. Isn't that just a sad coincidence?
Yeah, very, very sad.
Wow, just crazy that these early records, so works that could have proven the reliability of Islamic tradition mysteriously were not preserved. It's a sheer coincidence. Trust me, bro. None of the earliest works exist today. So, according to Islamic tradition, the first biographers of Prophet Muhammad were Urwa ibn al-Zubayr, died 714, Aban ibn Uthman, Wah ibn Munabih, Sharhabil ibn Sa'd, ibn Shihab al-Sukhri, and Abu Bakr ibn Muhammad ibn Hazm, 757. So that's all from the 8th century. Now, it's very convenient that all of these sources are missing. All we have is a claim that these works once existed. It is merely a claim, it is not evidence. Now, it's really hard to imagine that these critical works were not preserved by the Muslims. Why would they allow all of these critical works? Imagine this was the Gospels. Don't you find that a bit strange, TDK?
Yeah, it's very strange. And as they claim their books are well preserved and all these kinds of claims, but yeah, it's look like there's something hiding, or for some strange reasons the earliest sources is missing. Yeah, that's very strange.
Very unusual. So the earliest surviving biographies are all based on later compilations and reworkings, edits of these initial accounts. Right. Now, Islamic tradition teaches that these biographers were followed by Musa ibn Uqba, died 763, 8th century. Muammar ibn Rashid died 772. What year did Muhammad die, TDK? What year is he supposed to have died?
I can't remember the exact
Six
year.
six
Uh,
32. 632. So hold on.
632.
So the so let's see. Jesus died in the year 33, the year 34. We have Gospels, we have
Yeah,
early Christian writings that date as early as the year 48, right? So you've got Gospels that are
yeah.
written within 20 years of his death. And later research, newer research, has now shown that the Gospels, the writing dates of these Gospels move closer and closer to the year of Jesus' death. If Muhammad died in 632, and if I take 772 and I minus 632, that's at least 140 years later that the first reliable existing accounts of Muhammad suddenly come about. 140 years later. That's about the same period that the Gnostic Gospels start after the death of Jesus. So now you've got second and third century accounts that suddenly claim to be original. So any comment or thought before I go? Right. So, hello, historical Christianity. Good to see you. Okay. Then we've got guys like Muhammad ibn Ishaq, died in 774. None of these works exist either. Isn't that a coincidence? So, trust me, we had a bunch of guys that wrote some really good literature that can't find it right now. But luckily, they had guys that copied it. They had guys that copied it, and they made accurate copies of this literature. But just don't have one of these books. Those also disappeared. Gee whiz, what a coincidence. Muslims now can take on faith that these once existed, but there is no evidence that they did. Right, so now let's look at the Al-Sirah al-Nabawiyya. Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, right? So these are two different authors. They produced the Sirah round about 767 AD. So that's about 140 years after Muhammad dies, on which Ibn Hisham based his via an intermediary, right? So you have a biographer who wrote a biography based on a biography, right? That was written about by another biographer based on him getting it through another biographer. Does that sound like a credible story to you, TDK? Or does that sound like broken telephone?
No, it doesn't. Yeah, it
So
does. There's some loose lines there.
So you've got a work that was written by Ibn Hisham, who received it from a guy called Al-Baqai, who received it from Ibn Ishaq, who apparently got it from a guy whose work no longer exists. Ibn Ishaq's work also no longer exists. So we don't have a shred of hard evidence that a person called Ibn Ishaq actually wrote this. All we have is a claim in the mouth of Ibn Hisham. In what way, in what may be a way to explain away the non-existence of Ibn Ishaq's work, we get strange reports from Muslim scholars that he was a forger. So just like Muslims commonly stating that the Sahih Hadith are that's daif, that's fraudulent, that's fabricated. No, you can't believe that. No, Aisha was not 6 years old. That's fraudulent. Islam is the only religion where you say that your sources are fraudulent, fake, or unreliable to defend your religion. And here they do exactly the same thing. So Malik ibn Anas called him Dajjal men Dajjalila, the quack of many quacks, or the fraud of many frauds, or fraud among frauds. So yeah, that puts a lot. Malik ibn Anas is very important. He's one of the four major scholars of Islam, what's called the Mujtahids Mutlaq, the supreme scholars, the absolute scholars. Technically, it means the absolute scholars. He's one of the four founders of the schools of fiqh, or schools of the Sharia that the Muslims follow. Very important man in Islam. A Dajjal can be translated as a liar, an impostor, or a quack. Imam Malik ibn Anas used to say Muhammad ibn Ishaq is a Dajjal from the Dajjals. So, yeah, Imam Malik called Ibn Ishaq a liar and an impostor for writing false stories about the Prophet Muhammad. According to Islamic teaching, someone who willfully, deliberately writes lies about Muhammad goes straight to hell. So, our source of Muhammad comes from a guy that, according to one of the major scholars in Islam, is in hell. Do you think that's a great start?
No, not a great start at all. It's looking too bad for them.
Yeah, imagine Saint Paul comes along and says, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those guys are frauds. They wrote lies. It's like you can't trust those guys. You know, it's like, huh? So Al-Bukhari apparently didn't trust him either. And Ibrahim
Yeah.
bin Sa'd, when asked about the accusations against Ibn Ishaq, denied them and suggested that Ibn Ishaq had been unfairly treated by the people of Medina. So what we'll find is there is a list, people pointing fingers in opposite directions. So let's go to Islam QA, right? Islam Question and Answer is the biggest Islamic advice site in the world. So this is Islam QA, status of Muhammad ibn Ishaq, the narrator of Al-Maghazi. In the view of Hadith scholars, Maghazi is blood. Blood means shedding blood. Essentially, the context is shedding blood, the wars of the Prophet. So yeah, the Al-Maghazi are how Prophet Muhammad killed people and drew blood, which tells us that Islam's a religion of peace. Wouldn't you agree, TDK?
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, the Dajjal is also the name of the Islamic false prophet at the end times. So yeah, he's a Dajjal. Yeah. So yeah, that's all. Everyone's obviously thinking about radio. Yeah. Okay. So Juliet Abrams says that's why I say it's religion of interpretation of interpretation. Yeah. Fair enough. Right. So
Yeah.
thank you very much, Philip. Real original source research. Yeah, we're going to get into a lot of sources here. So Ibn Ishaq was held in high esteem among the scholars of his own time. My. Now suddenly the most popular advice site in the world, Muslim advice site that gets about 400 million, up to 400, between 150 and 400 million queries a month, suddenly says, no, the guy's legit because of the vastness of his knowledge. Imam Dahabi said of him, he was the first one to write down knowledge in Medina. That was before Malik and Dewa. So he comes before Imam Malik. So Imam Malik had an argument with him. He disagreed with him and started to smear and slander him. So Malik comes afterwards out of jealousy and starts to say bad things. He was like a wondrous ocean of knowledge, but he was not as precise as he should have been. Okay. Imam Malik regarded him as having lied and describing him as a charlatan, a dajjal. The scholars did not accept that from him because he did not mention any evidence for regarding Ibn Ishaq as having lied. So scholars actually rejected Imam Malik's claims. So yeah, I guess we're off to a great start. Yaqub ibn Shayba said, I asked Ali, i.e. Ibn al-Madini, how are the hadith of Ibn Ishaq in your view? Is it sahih? And he said, yes, his hadith is sahih in my view. So the sirah is sahih. Any comments, TDK?
Yeah, this is interesting. So you have one of like you have a few of them agreeing it's not authentic, then one saying it's sahih, it's authentic, and you have a lot of that's why, yeah, that comment is right. Interpretation of interpretation, whichever one they choose to go with. Like if it sounds good, yeah, we'll take this. If it's not, oh, it's daif. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. So he said, and by the way, guys, I am streaming on YouTube, on Rumble, and on X. I'm streaming through StreamYard. So, yeah. So, hello to any new subscribers or viewers on X and on StreamYard and on, sorry, on Rumble. Okay. So, Ibn Adi, trustworthy narrators and leading scholars did not refrain from narrating from him. And there is nothing wrong with him. So, if it's good enough for the Muslim scholars, it is good enough for me to quote from this guy. Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar. Now, Ibn Hajar, a Hafiz is someone who basically has memorized the Quran, can quote the Quran, he's a major scholar, but also Ibn Hajar is famous for writing the most famous commentary on, is it Ibn Hajar? No, it could be, sorry, I could be thinking of Asqalani. No, let me stop there in case I make a mistake. Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar said, no, I think it is Ibn Hajar. He wrote the most famous commentary on Sahih Bukhari, called the Fat al-Bari. If I recall, that should be the guy. And this, he's regarded as a major scholar because Muslim scholars apparently do not quote the Sahih Hadith of Bukhari directly. They go to the interpretation or the tafsir of Sahih Bukhari written by Ibn Hajar, which is a more complete exegesis of that. So he is an incredibly major scholar. The reports which are narrated by him alone, even if they do not reach the level of Sahih, they are of the level of Hasan, if he clearly states that the narrator told him directly. End quote. Fat al-Bari. Yes, it's the Fat al-Bari. So there you go. He's reliable. But under the bus with you. Yet Muslim scholars, especially today, throw Ibn Ishaq under the bus. But Ibn Hisham's work that is based on him is trustworthy. Hold on. Ibn Ishaq is untrustworthy. He's a liar. He's a forger. He's a dajjal. He's a charlatan. His work is not reliable, not trustworthy, except it is trustworthy, but it's not trustworthy work at all. But the guy who then edits his work and rewrites it, that guy is reliable. Fine. So you've got falsehoods written by Ibn Ishaq, but Ibn Hisham's work that is based on Ibn Ishaq's work, that one you can trust. That's all good stuff. Right. So with regards to the that's da'if claim, let's ask a simple question. How do we know the names of Muhammad's wives? Which page in the Quran, TDK, has the list of the names of Muhammad's wives?
There is none. You cannot find it without going to the Hadith and the Sira. Yeah.
What are you saying? The Quran has a missing data?
I thought yes, I also thought Allah made a clear book so that we should have understand, but we're missing some informations. We have to go to the Hadiths and Sira, which is
So
supposedly reliable. Yeah.
we want to become Muslims and we want to learn how to say the prayers in the mosque. Like the bending down and the hands on the knees and sticking your finger in your ears and all of that stuff. Which page is that instructional on how to do the prayers and the ablution? Which page is that on in the Quran?
Um, we may need a lot of research to find that in the
It's not
Quran.
in there. It's not in there. It's none of
No,
this
it's
is
not.
in the Quran. They'll say you need to pray. Okay, show me how. What are the steps? It's not. It's not in the Quran. It's taken from the Sharia. It's taken from the Sirah. It's taken from the Hadiths, and it's written out finally in the Sharia. The Sharia defines it. So, in other words, these sources are incredibly important because without them, we wouldn't know what the names of Muhammad's wives are. I think this is important. It's not in the Quran. Now, if these sources are da'if and unreliable and fabricated and forged and lies, and then how can Muslims prove to me what the names of Muhammad's wives are? Then are Muslims lying since the start of Islam? Do you think that is a fair question, TDK?
Yes, it's a very fair question, which they have to go to the Hadith. And there are some who reject the Hadith, but if they reject the Hadith, they don't understand the Quran and don't know the wives of Muhammad and all this stuff. It's missing.
Yeah, then it's just like someone made it up. So yeah, either they reliable or they're not. So this for me is a problem, and I think for Muslims they need to rethink this. This is a serious problem. So now the names of the Prophet Muhammad's wives are known primarily through Islamic historical sources, the Hadiths and the Sirah. The sources are crucial for understanding the life and the practices of Muhammad. If they are unreliable or they are fabrications, then Muslims are either lying about the names of Muhammad's wives and other embarrassing facts. Else, we got to ask them, okay, where in the Quran is this? If it's not in the Quran and the sources that you claim are unreliable are the ones you're getting this from, then are we saying that it's wrong? Someone's been lying to somebody here? This is a serious problem. I'd love some clear answers. Right. Now, this is the sealed nectar. This is the biography of the noble prophet by Safur Rahman al Mabarakpuri, one of the most famous biographies of Muhammad, right? Actually, let me just go to a source. Let me just go to my website, to my YouTube page. I just want to show everyone something. And this gets worse, but I won't focus on this here, but it's something I think that's important for me to bring up. So I just want to go here. This is Qadi'iyya. This is a very famous sirah, right? This is one of the more famous sirahs of Muhammad. This is the biographies, like think of the Gospels of Jesus Christ. And Qadi'iyad, right? So is it true, according to the Ashifa of Qadi'iyad, that trees walked and moved to shield Muhammad during his private toilet moments? So Muhammad gets off his camel and needs to go take a dump, and so he's out in the open in the sand. So what he does is he talks to the rocks and he talks to the trees, and the rocks form behind him and they shield him, and the trees come and stand behind him and shield him from the view of his men. And then Muhammad does his thing. And in the Sirah, the earth opens up and swallows his number ones and his number twos. And then the earth closes, and a sweet, sweet, amazing fragrance comes up from the ground where Muhammad left his number two. And then Muhammad takes the tree by the hand and walks it back to its location where it originally was. Alhamdulillah. Isn't that just amazing, TDK? Don't you wish Jesus was this amazing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really incredible. Like the holy saint, yeah, he's such a holy prophet. It's very
Yeah, I mean,
incredible miracles and signs.
quite literally, his poop don't stink. Literally, in the Sirah. We will get to those references. We'll read those for you later. But here's an example. Section 16, on the tree speaking and testifying to his prophethood, and it's answering his call. In the Sahih, right, it is reported that the Messenger of Allah went to relieve himself and did not see anything with which to shield himself. There were two trees at the edge of the wadi. The Messenger of Allah went to one of them and took one of its branches, saying, "Let me lead you by the permission of Allah." And he led it like a camel on a halter, whose leader cajoles it. Jabir mentioned he did the same with the other one until they were leveled. And he said, "Join together for me." And they joined. And the famous 6th century Hijrah classical text, Ashifa, is widely accepted as the best, most comprehensive, and most important book about the Messenger of Allah. That's just one of the stories. There's lots of stories. There's loads of stories. So yeah, none of these miracles are in the Quran, just by the way. Okay. Any comment before I go on, TDK?
Yeah, it's interesting that none of them are in the Quran, and these sources they pick and they choose. So yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Very very strange.
Yeah. And guys, TDK is on the channel. Please look up his. I because I'm using a new setup, I did not transfer all my settings, so I may not have added his link, but just look up his name, Truth Defender Knight. You'll find him on YouTube. Do support him. And also, if you like the broadcast, please do like, do share, do subscribe, tell your friends, share it on social media. And thank you again all for supporting the channel as you have. So, Hadiths. Hadiths are collections of sayings, actions, and approvals of Prophet Muhammad, recorded by his companions and later compiled by Islamic scholars. These are hundreds of years later. These narrations include details about his personal life, including his marriages. Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim are the two most respected hadith collections. They provide information about Muhammad's wives, including Aisha, Khadija, and others. Are Aisha, Khadija, and others mentioned in the Quran, or is Mary the only woman that's named in the Quran, if I recall? Or yeah, I think she's the only one that's. I mean, I don't think they mention his wives in the Quran, correct?
No, his wife is not mentioned. Yeah, Mary is mentioned by name.
Yeah, I think there's a limit. There's like very little information in the Quran, right? The reliability of our hadith apparently depends on what they call on the chain of narration, the isnad, and the credibility of the transmitter, right? Which is meticulously scrutinized by scholars. Now, the sirah are the biographies of the wars of the Prophet. They have a comprehensive account of his life, including his marriages. These biographies, such as Arahik ul Maktoum, the sealed nectar, are based on historical records and hadiths. So there are lots of Islamic sources, documentary sources we're not aware of. They provide detailed narratives about the Prophet's life, including names and backgrounds of his wives. The reliability. Now, the reliability is a subject of massive debate by scholars, even Muslim scholars, as we pointed out. The hadith are considered reliable if they have an unbroken and supposedly trustworthy chain of narrators, otherwise known as Chinese whispers coupled with trust me, bro. However, inconsistencies and variations in some narrations have led to different interpretations, and they say discussions, they mean arguments among scholars. The Sirah, while generally seen as a genuine account, also relies on the same historical records and hadiths, and thus they have similar reliability issues. But we're going to see the Sirah and later on the hadiths are built on sand. So let's have a look at a non-extant Sirah from Ibn Ishaq. So we now have a dilemma of possibilities, neither of which is ideal. Ibn Ishaq did write an attempted biography of Muhammad at least 135 years after Muhammad died. This was then censored and rewritten by Ibn Hisham. We know he redacted it. He made a smaller version, minus a lot of changes, right? Minus a lot of things removed and a lot of changes. This means his biography is a suppression and a distortion of an earlier work. So either Ibn Hisham did have, but he edited it and distorted it, or Ibn Hisham did not have an earlier work from Ibn Ishaq, which means we can dismiss it as a fiction, written almost 2 centuries after these events. Either scenario is very bad for the reliability of the Sirah. Any comment before I continue?
Yeah, it's very bad for them. So yeah, and either way they go, it's not looking good.
Yep. So there is no original of Ibn Hisham's Sirah. Oh boy. So we don't have the guys that Ibn Ishaq copied from. We don't have Ibn Ishaq. We've got Ibn Hisham, but not an original Ibn Hisham. We've got copies. So we have copies of copies of copies of copies. And of the first 3 guys, we actually don't have originals. We don't even know if they were real, if those books existed. So Ibn Hisham's work has survived, but only in copies, not the original. 2 copies exist of Ibn Hisham. The latter is more heavily edited. So we've got 2 versions, one of which is more edited. So the fact that Ibn Hisham's original work was not preserved undermines its credibility. Then what the copyist gave us is what he wanted us to read, is what survived. Why did he delete so much when he had the original, supposedly? So that one of the copies is heavily edited also leads to a question. Which one is the correct one? So this is evidence of the Islamic tradition self-censoring even its most valued histories, right? You cannot claim that this is historically reliable if your earliest sources are missing and a fourth removed set of sources show signs of tampering. And this is supposed to be original early stories of Muhammad, the founder. Imagine the Bible with this heavily edited. We could never trust it. So, what could have been useful early books had they existed were not preserved because they were not acceptable to later traditions. Any comment, TDK?
Yeah, this is what they're trying to point out about the Bible. But as we're looking in here now, we can see they're the one who has it, and they're accusing us of having not reliable sources, which their sources is not looking good at all.
So Jushok says, I love how the books were edited and fabricated, yet they still portray Muhammad as a maniac warlord. I will say there seems to be a degree of truth there. I mean, someone existed. I think Muhammad's a composite of maybe 1 or more people, or 2 or more people if he's a composite. But there seems to have been someone. or multiple someones who were merged into a single figure, or there was a figure that started off as the basis and his image got redacted and changed and edited and altered. But yeah, it's, and then they tell us the Bible is not reliable, but Jesus is not really real. He didn't die, and Muhammad's in the Bible, except the Bible's corrupt. You're like, oh, so Muhammad's in the corrupted Bible, but not in the original one, which you don't have a copy of, whatever. Right. So there is no original of Ibn Hisham's Sirah. There's no original of Ibn Ishaq. Now let's meet a guy called T. Well, this is Mr. Wistenfeld. This is Mr. Wistenfeld with his wonderful beard here. This is one of his books, Geschichte der arabischen Ärzte und Naturforscher. So, in other words, this is the history of Arabian doctors and researchers, nature researchers, right? By Ferdinand Wistenfeld. If you'd like to buy this book, it'll cost you €2,500, which is roughly $2,800 if you'd like to buy a copy. So clearly the guy's not important. I mean, it's only going on $3,000 to buy the thing. Can't be important. So the sirah that is commonly used today is not an original source. It is actually created by a Western Orientalist from the 19th century. So the academic, the critical academic sirah that we use today was created by this guy in the 1800s. This is Heinrich Ferdinand Wistenfeld. He created the sirah used today in 1858 to 1860 based on earlier manuscripts. Not one manuscript, multiple manuscripts. So he had to make decisions between competing and contradictory versions of the same story. He decided what he thought fitted best from contradictory stories, and he created the first sirah of Muhammad, the first biography of Muhammad, the first complete source that we know of, based on incomplete and contradictory versions. And everyone now points to the sirah and says, hey, we've got the sirah, it's all good to go. But if they didn't have this Western Orientalist, and Muslims are always criticizing Orientalists, you wouldn't have the sirah. Any thoughts before we go on?
Yeah, this is interesting. And yeah, without him, they wouldn't have it, because you see there's so many contradiction. And also, like as the previous slide stated, it's heavily edited, so we can think what's been left out and what's missing. And the ones that they do have, as you look at it, the trees are there, obeying the command of Mohammed with his all of these strange stories and all of these messed up things. So you could really think back what's been left out and what's missing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Shalom, everyone. I'm an Indian ex-Muslim. Welcome, Hussein Khan. So yeah, there are questions to be asked here. And the guy does have a little bit of a Muslimy beard. He certainly does. Let's continue. So this Western Orientalist that Muslims turn to for what they know of Muhammad, because what we know of Muhammad comes from the Sirah and from the Hadiths. So this is Georg August Universität Göttingen. Heinrich Ferdinand Wistenfeld, born 31 July 1808, in Hannover-Schmünden, died on 8 February 1899 in Hanover, son of a sugar manufacturer, spent almost his entire academic life in Göttingen. He received his Doctor of Philosophy in 1831, received his second doctoral degree in 1832, appointed professor, and then professor and chair. And his main appointment was as director of the university library. He did almost no academic teaching. So he dedicated almost all of his time to the study of Arabic, and he no longer studied. And the longer he studied, the more he focused exclusively on Arabic. So this is despite the fact that he had initially studied all Oriental languages, including Sanskrit. So next to the Vergleichungstabellen, the last edition was prepared by B. Spuler in 61, and other outdated reference works on genealogy, historical writing, and the history of medicine. Wistenfeld produced a number of most important editions of classical Arabic texts, with indices such as those by Ibn Hisham, Ibn Qutayba's Ma'arif, Ibn Khalikan, Bakri's Mujam, Yaqut's Buldan, and blah, 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 and others. These editions do not follow the principles of classical Arabic philology. In other words, there's an issue with the language, with the words. So this tells us there's something wrong with the grammar here. Their value varies depending on the manuscripts on which they were based, so copies of copies of copies. Nonetheless, Arabic and Islamic studies owe a debt to Wüstenfeld's extraordinary fervor or enthusiasm, and his works have been indispensable for a long time and remain so even today. So, Ibn D'Souza, is the Muhammad of the Quran, Hadiths, Sirah one person or more than one person? It seems to be a composite. Look, there seems to have been an original figure that inspired something. That original figure may well have been Jesus, but there looks to have been a copycat prophet in the region at the time. There must have been one person that was inspirational. However, the current vision or version we have of this seems to be a composite of multiple individuals who's a military leader, a philosopher, a moral example, a military example, a political example. So they seem to have created this composite character to compete with Jesus. It doesn't seem to be a historical person. It's a composite individual. So okay, let's continue now. So summary: Heinrich Ferdinand Wüstenfeld made an important contribution to the study of the Sirah, and he produced a critical edition of Ibn Hisham's version of Ibn Ishaq's biography of Mohammed. So he creates the most complete, most authoritative, most supposedly non-contradictory version. So he published a critical Arabic edition of Ibn Hisham's Sirat Rasul-Allah, the life of the Messenger of Allah, in 1860. Any comments, TDK?
No, it's okay. You can carry on.
Yeah, Inda says Alfred Guillaume received the notes from Professor Wüstenfeld after his death in 1909. Yeah, we'll have a look at Guillaume later. So, this edition, he entitled it Das Leben Mohammeds nach Mohammed ibn Ishaq bearbeitet von Abdel Malik ibn Hisham. So, the life of Muhammad, according to Muhammad ibn Ishaq, edited by Abdel Malik ibn Hisham. The life of Muhammad, according to, I translated that. I didn't realize I actually had the English version there. It translated that in my head. Okay, right. Wüstenfeld's edition was based on comparing multiple Arabic manuscripts to produce a reliable, in other words, the texts were unreliable. So he had to compile all of these, put them together, and create a reliable Arabic text of Ibn Hisham's work. This critical Arabic edition of Wüstenfeld became an important source for subsequent translations and studies of the Sirah, even by Arabs, including Alfred Guillaume's English translation. And everyone's going to go, well, you can only understand Islam in the original Arabic. You have to speak Arabic, which is nice, except Wüstenfeld only worked in Arabic. He did not produce a German version or an English version. He produced an Arabic version from Arabic sources. Any comments, TDK?
Yeah, I love the accent and the statement from the Muslim. Yeah, it has to be Arabic. But yeah, as you see, he did study and his sources is Arabic. So yeah, they have no excuse there.
Yeah, he did not translate the work into another language, but rather produced a scholarly Arabic edition that wanted to establish an accurate version of the original Arabic text. This edition has been valuable for researchers and translators working on the Sirah of Muhammad. So now we go to Professor Fred Donner. This is Studies in Late Antiquity and Early Islam, Narratives of Islamic Origins, the Beginnings of Islamic Historical Writing by Professor Fred M. Donner. This goes back 26 years to 1998. So, this comfortable replication of the Islamic tradition's own view of Islamic origins would be wonderfully acceptable if it could withstand critical scrutiny. But, he writes, serious students of Islamic origins began to challenge it over a century ago. And we're talking 200 years ago, as they became familiar with a wider range of narrative sources, particularly with those produced by some of the earlier historical writers of the Islamic tradition. So these Western scholars are drawing upon the very earliest Islamic manuscripts. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, manuscripts of a number of important early Arabic sources became known to Western scholars. And the arrival of printing in the Arab world in the late 19th century provided an important stimulus to the historical exploration of Islamic origins, because Arab scholars began to publish all of their important texts. For instance, Muslims will argue that when we use the Reliance of the Traveler, the Umdat al-Salik, which is the most popular Sharia law manual in the world, that, this is a weak manual, it's an unreliable manual. The fact is, it is the very first Sharia manual to be, well, in the modern world, to be published in English. The reason it's the first one is because it is so important. It is because of its importance that the resources, the time, the money, the years were spent translating it. These scholars are not going to translate it unless they think it's important. So these documents that were used, that were translated, are the most important ones. The first and most important ones are done first, right? These were previously only available in manuscripts and thus not widely available. And then they started printing them. Any thoughts or comments, TDK?
No, I'm just taking in information here. It's a lot of stuff that the Muslim needs to know about. But even though they hear about it, they will still just go around it and dance around all of this. But yeah, the sources don't lie, and yeah, the facts and evidence are against them as usual.
Yeah. So now a series of massive editorial projects resulted in sound editions based on the known manuscripts, such as the Sirah, the biography of Prophet Muhammad, of Muhammad ibn Ishaq. And then we have a thing called the Tabakat, which is a biographical dictionary. Biographical dictionary is a short dictionary that has biographies of various important Muslim scholars. Now, I want to mention why Muslims lose their minds. Now, I've just referenced the Sharia and I referenced the Umdat al-Salik, or the reliance of the traveler, and the tools of the worshiper as the most common English Sharia manual, Sharia law manual in the world. This says here, if a Quran is being purchased for someone, it is obligatory that the person be Muslim. The same is true of books of Hadith and books containing the words and deeds of the early Muslims. Quran in this context means any work that contains some of the Quran, even a slight amount. This ruling holds for any religious books, even the Tabakat of Shar'ani. Now, we just spoke of the Tabakat of a different scholar. So the simple fact is, Muslim sources are deemed in the Sharia secret. Non Muslims are not to be reading them. You, as a non Muslim who are reading these sources, you are breaking Sharia law. You are breaking the law of the Muslims. These are secrets. They're not supposed to share it with you. And so you can see even these biographical sources are meant to be kept away from the eyes of non Muslims. Of course, the cat's out of the bag now. And the more we read, the more we learn, the more we actually get better than Muslims at exegeting their own sources and knowing them. But yeah, they are not meant to share even the Quran with us. You are reading it for a purpose that does not benefit Islam. Therefore, you are reading it in bad faith, and they must stop you, which is crazy. Joe says, "What happened to your videos on atheism?" Check my YouTube channel. It's called Lloyd De Jong, and just search for atheism. You'll find them. There's all like 20 of them. Yeah. So yeah, any comments from you, TDK?
Yeah, it's strange that they don't want other person than Muslim to read their book because yeah, as we're reading here now and we can see there's a lot of stuff going on, and the more we read, the more Islam is not looking good.
Yep, exactly. So Professor Donna says here, as a result of efforts of these Western scholars, sorry, did I just make a bad? Let me just fix that here. Okay, there we go. As a result of efforts such as these, Western scholars found themselves confronted with an embarrassment of riches in source material. Far from clarifying or making clear the historical development of Islam, the new material confused the issue. It actually left everyone more confused because the narrative, the standard Islamic narrative, was falling apart after reading these sources. And this all raised doubts about the truth of the traditional picture of early Islam. These scholars are going like, this story makes no sense. This can't be true. Numerous instances of glaring contradictions amongst different sources, of logical and chronological absurdity, things that existed out of time, things that happened hundreds of years before, hundreds of years later were being referenced, and that's wrong. Implausibility or patent sectarian or political bias. I'll give you one example. When you look at the attacks on St. Paul, many of these Muslim scholars will say that, well, St. Paul in the Bible, we hate St. Paul because it's actually Paulianity. I don't know why you Christians call it Christianity. It's actually Paulianity. And Paul, he was the son of Emperor Constantine. Now hold on, Emperor Constantine's from the 300s. He died in the first century.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's just one small example of how stupid these Islamic scholars are. Your thoughts, TDK?
yeah, definitely. Their thoughts are really silly. I actually did a a video about Paul. Yeah, it really doesn't make sense. They're pointing towards Paul, but as we're looking at their sources, it's really what they have. They're accusing us what they have. So yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. They even put Paul in the 4th century and 5th century, and it's insane. I mean, it's crazy. Look at my series called Polemics. I'm actually just bringing that up. I have a series on 2 parts called Polemics. Just look it up. It's discussion of the Islamic history on St. Paul. It goes back to like the 8th century already. It's insanity. It's hysterically funny, actually. It's laughably funny. So the unreliability of the Islamic narratives, okay? And this was instrumental in generating another approach to early Islamic history. Scholars realized early on, like, this is trash. We can't just trust the story. We're going to have to start doing some scholarship here, right? We're going to have to do some serious scholarship about Islam. So that's what they start doing. So they have multiple approaches. One of these is the source critical approach. So middle of the 19th century, now you're looking at the 1830s onwards, right? Some Western students, right, they try to resolve or explain away the contradictions and logical absurdities in the sources through careful comparative source criticism. The source problems had first been noted in narrative accounts. So the source problem had been noticed even by Muslim scholars. This is not something that the Western scholars discovered. They start developing ways to explain the existence of divergent or contradictory accounts, to identify which of the several accounts should be deemed the most trustworthy. So the Muslim scholars couldn't figure it out, so the Western scholars had to do their job. Someone says polemics was very useful, as you said, Mickey Mouse scholars. Yeah, it's crazy. Let me see. The unholy Quran is totally unreliable. Yeah, well, yes. John Kasuri says the same argument made by them of Christianity being Paulianity could be used against them, since most of the arguments come from Hadith and not the Quran, considering they come from 200, 300 plus years later. And also that they don't have Muhammad's Quran. They don't even have the Uthmanic Quran. They don't have a Qureshi Quran because the Quran is supposed to have been written in the language of the Quraysh. So where's Uthman's Quran? Where's Muhammad's Quran? Where's the Qureshi Quran? They've got later Qurans from the 14th century. They chose Hafs. Hafs is from when? The 1400s, 1300s? So they've got a Quran from 700 years after Muhammad, and we're supposed to go, yeah, that's the original word for word book of Allah. Any comments or thoughts, TDK?
Yeah, it's too much. Yeah, their sources are way after, and they come and say the gospel has been written so many centuries after Jesus, which is not true. Which they have so many centuries after they take the Quran from Hafs. It's just a recitation of all of these persons, and this is what they have today. They don't have reliable sources.
No, they don't. And thank you, Sheikh Bayardi. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful. I do appreciate it. Enjoying the broadcast, Lloyd. No, thank you, Sheikh Bayardi, for that donation. Very kind. Always much appreciated. So we have a question here as well. When was Mecca established? And guys, I do appreciate it does cost to run the channel, and so I do appreciate these donations. When was Mecca established? I'll be doing a talk on the 3rd, I think, the 3rd or the 4th of August with Eric the Kafir. Eric, he's from the Crossing Crescent discussion group. He and I'll be doing a talk on Mecca, because I'll let him do his presentation on Mecca, but I'm also doing my own independent work. I'm trying to do my own research on Mecca so that I can hopefully present my own evidence and hopefully bring something fresh to the discussion. Okay, so let's continue. It was assumed that the extant narratives included much accurate historical material, but they said no. This was either once reliable accounts that had become distorted, so therefore it's no longer reliable, or popular material which was originally written not by early Muslim historians, but by storytellers or purveyors of historical novels. In other words, fairy tales, myths, legends. So either these are maybe true historical tales that were somehow corrupted, or these are legends, myths that were popular, right? Or even polemics that were motivated by tribal or other bias. So these were used for political or other social or religious uses against other tribes to establish a particular religious view or agenda or political agenda. So in other words, completely unreliable. Later, polemic or dogma interpolated by later transmitters. In other words, a jumble of these stories, right? And editors into the context of older historical material. In other words, we're now in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 14th century. They are taking legends of that day and then claiming this is what Muhammad said and did 800 years ago. So you've got now a situation where these are completely unreliable, but the scholars are saying this is not history. By no means. It's legend, it's corruption, it's agenda driven propaganda, but it's absolutely positively not history. Any comment, TDK?
Yeah, it's definitely myths and fables. I actually did one video on that as well. And yeah, as we can see when you read it, you see all these strange stories, as the quote is, storytellers. And yeah, they either have to accept it, or they would say, oh, it's daif. We don't accept it. Yeah.
Yeah, even the Sahih is daif, right? So that's just how that works. All right. So, in summary, none of the supposed earliest biographies survive. All right, this is from Urwa ibn Zubair from the 700s, right, early 700s, to Ibn Ishaq from the late 700s, 770s, right? Ibn Hisham's Sirah was written in the early 830s. We're talking 60 years after Ishaq dies, or Ishaq, and this is 2 centuries. We're talking 200 years after Mo died, right? So we don't have an original of Ibn Ishaq. We don't have an original of Ibn Hisham. We don't have a single original of any one of these guys. In fact, we've got nothing from these guys, nothing whatsoever. But trust me, bro, this is history. Now, only 2 copies exist of Ibn Hisham, one of which is heavily edited. So we can see from the 2 sources that clearly editing, agenda driven editing, was going on. Any comment before I go on?
Yeah, it's definitely heavily edited, because even if you look at the hadiths now, what you would have this issue. One narration could be daif, and then you go in another source and it's sahih. So one, like, they, as we can see, they're all disagreeing with each other. They pick and they choose however they want to grade the hadiths. They don't understand their own sources.
Yeah, agreed. And Jet Set Journey says even the Zamzam water is piped in from desalination plants, yeah, which is true. I once did a security design to put a series of cameras and a radar system on the desalination plant where the plant where the water comes from. I designed a security system for that particular inlet, oddly enough, when I worked in the Middle East. So, yeah, and let's see. What's oh, she says, yeah, you mean the Germans who reconstructed the biographies of Mo? Yeah, the Germans. Yeah, we can't talk about the Muslim scholars. We got to talk about the Germans here. So yeah. Yes, I Juice Rock, I've noticed your comment, and I have done several presentations on the Turks and on what's the head of the guy from Turkey? What was his name? Ataturk. And I have another one that I'm busy making. I've already done the script. I've done the audio. I just need to put together the videos. So yeah, and the Nazis loved Ataturk for a good reason, because he was a murderous, genocidal tyrant. Whatever picture you have of Ataturk being this forward-thinking, progressive, modernist, no, no, it's just false. Okay, moving on. Right. So let's see. Okay. So the hadith about monkeys stoning a she monkey for sexual immorality had me on the floor laughing. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of funny stuff. Okay. Let's continue. The sirah we have today was created by a Western Orientalist, Heinrich Ferdinand Wüstenfeld, in 1860. So early criticism, right? And this is from Robert Spencer's book, Did Muhammad Exist? An Inquiry into Islam's Obscure Origins. So likewise, dubious about the historical legitimacy of the early Islamic text was the Italian scholar of the Middle East, Prince Leone Catani, right? This is from 1870 to 1935. He says, we can find almost nothing true on Muhammad in the traditions, the Hadiths. We can discount as apocryphal all the traditional material that we possess. Henry Lammens, one of the top scholars in the West, died 1937, a Flemish Jesuit, made a critical study of the Islamic traditions about Muhammad. casting doubt on, amongst other things, the traditional dates of Muhammad's birth and death. And remember, we've got radiocarbon dating of some of the older Qurans that put the Quran to what, 548. So that's like 30 years before the birth of Muhammad, even earlier than that. So yeah, you've clearly got some major issues there, right? So this, wow, thank you, Juliet Abram. Very, very grateful. Thank you for that. So the sale of gold says Mecca was apparently built in 892 according to the inscription on a big rock. Yeah, I'll be talking about Mecca in 2 or 3 weeks, so we'll get to that. Yeah. Lamens noted the artificial character and absence of critical sense. In other words, this stuff doesn't make any sense. Please make it make sense. In the compilation of the earliest biographies of the Prophet of Islam, although he warned that there can be no question of rejecting the whole en bloc. So he says, hold on, we can't reject all of it. Even if these are fairy tales, even if these are myths, they are still retellings of concepts, ideas, stories that are still relevant and culturally contextual to the time. Any comment or thought on that, TDK?
Yeah, I don't know how they. Yeah, I think they do, because anytime you show them one of the stories, they try to make it seem like, oh, it's metaphorical, or it has some kind of meaning behind it. It's not what it means, or this is, oh, it's daif, or you have all these silly claims. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's clearly, so look, we can say, sure, it's false, sure, it's fake, sure, it's not correct history. That doesn't mean we can dismiss it though, because imagine we find the one of the early apocryphal gospels, right? So you take a Gnostic gospel, you take the gospel of Philip. It's clearly not Christian. It's clearly false. That doesn't mean you throw it away and burn it, because it clearly tells you, look, first of all, this is what people were thinking historically. It tells you about the writing. It tells you about the materials they used to write, right? The papyrus or the leather, right? The vellum or whatever. It tells you about the kind of ink. It tells you about the style of writing. It tells you about the location. It tells you about where and what they were thinking, what they were spreading. So there's a lot of historical data that can still be gathered, even if it's complete fabricated hogwash. So there's still truth to be derived from the falsehoods, right? Bear that in mind. And Wüstenfeld, yeah, that's true. Wüste, desert, and Feld, field. Funny, since there's so many desert fields in Germany. Yeah, where'd the guy get that beard, man? That's so. Right, let's continue. So now let's have a look at a guy called Ignaz Goldziher. Ignaz Goldziher lived from 1850 to 1921, is a Hungarian scholar of Islam. So he becomes the first academic in the West to understand the corpus of Hadith texts, and he wants to understand them in the context of conflicting, right? These are different tribal groups that are arguing over control of Islam and certain religious, political, and social agendas and interests, right? So the Islamic community is trying to establish which interpretation is going to be the one that wins out. He argues against prior views about the authenticity that these hadiths were creations of later periods and that their origins often reflect the later types of interest by the community. His analysis were limited to hadith that had previously been considered authentic or historical in traditional Islamic narratives. So he only used hadiths that were considered authentic by the Muslims, right? Goldziher inaugurated the critical study of hadith's authenticity and concluded the great majority of hadiths from the Prophet are documents not of the time to which they claim to belong, but created, he said, during the first centuries of Islam, i.e., they were fraudulent. However, we have other scholars. Now, he kind of had a little soft spot for Islam, which is weird. However, other scholars come along and then tell us something completely different. They say, no, these stories are written centuries later. We have evidence now that these hadiths may have been written as late as the 1800s. Even Bukhari was supposed to come from like the 10th century or something. This included hadith accepted even in the most rigorously critical Muslim collections, which meant that the meticulous isnads which supported them were utterly fictitious. So yeah, any comments on that? Because the scholarship is all over the place. Although he's a very Ignaz Goldziher is a very highly respected scholar. Any comments?
Yeah, it's all over the place. Like, we keep getting some agreeing, some disagreeing, some taking it as false, some taking it as, yeah, history. So yeah.
Yeah, so don't forget the later scholars are saying, look, these were written hundreds of years after Muhammad, 2, 3, 400 years, 500 years after Muhammad. They're false. Goldzier is saying, no, no, these are written like around the time, like a century or two. They're also false. They both agree they're false. So it's just they're only disagreeing as to
Yeah,
when they're written, not that they, not about the
yeah.
falsehood. They're just disagreeing on when they were written. So Goldzier
The
argued in
dates.
Muslim studies. Yes, sorry, go on.
No, no, the dates. Yeah, they're not agreeing on the dates. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. Goldzier argued in Muslim studies, Hadith were the product of debates and arguments within the emerging Islamic religion and society. So Islam was not founded in a day. It took hundreds of years to develop into what we know today, projected back into the time of the Prophet. So these are, as J. Smith often says, redacted backwards. And this is what we find. This is what more than one scholar has discovered and said. So this is a means of putting support for one party or agenda or another into the mouth of the Prophet. Tied to this, and Goldzier's observation of the massive scale on which hadith were forged, he observed that each position in every political and doctrinal controversy could be paired with numerous supporting hadiths, each equipped with an isnad to prove its authenticity. So a chain of narration from reliable transmitters. So in other words, everyone who had a particular religious or political or social position would claim that he got this from a tradition from Muhammad that somehow magically appeared for every single one of them to prove whatever case they had to make. Does that sound like reliable, TDK, or just convenient?
Very convenient, I would say.
Yeah, know or act that. Who knows? Who knows? These hadiths, yeah, just want us to wonder. So Goldzier also observed anachronisms. These are things that are in the wrong time, right? It's like seeing a a pocket watch in a documentary of dinosaurs, or seeing a cell phone in a documentary of dinosaurs. Like that's an anachronism. So he sees anachronisms in the hadith, including in reports that support the legitimacy of dynasties. Yeah, we should be ruling because we're doing just like Muhammad. Traditions addressing how believers should respond to ungodly rulers. Hadiths supporting particular positions in theological controversies, reports giving voice to local patriotism, all very convenient, reports praising the merits of particular localities, tribes, or families, apocalyptic prophecies of conquests and rebellions, hadiths praising the descendants of Ali, hadiths denying the legitimacy of Ali. So whatever position you had, you could find hadiths that supported your position. So contradictions abounded. Any
Yeah.
last word before I move to the next page?
Yeah, the hadiths suits with whichever agenda you're looking at. It supports that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I won't go very long today. We'll continue. We'll pick this up another time, but because my throat is going to suffer from talking too much. Okay. Now, matan. The word you must learn here is matan, the text, especially the text of a book, as distinguished from its oral explanation. So with hadiths, you have the matan, which is the actual words of the hadith, and then you have the isnad. The isnad is the proof that it came from the prophet or from a companion of the prophet. So basically, it's the broken telephone from Muhammad to someone, 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 to the guy who just told it to you, right? Or the guy who wrote it down. That's the isnad. But the actual thing that it says, that's called the matan. So in medicine, matan also means castration by incising and at the same time cauterizing or burning the wound. They say here the scrotum, in other words, removing your BALLS. That's by means of a red hot blade of iron and removing the testicles. The testicles. So Muslims did some fun things back in the day. In the science of the tradition, however, the hadiths, matan denotes the content or the text itself, distinct from the chain of traditionists who have handed it down, known as the isnad. Any comment, TDK?
No, it's okay.
Yeah, so every Muslim was making up whatever suited their agenda, whatever leadership wanted, they would make up hadiths that suited their political position or social position or religious position. Yes, so sale of gold. Yeah, we'll be talking about. We'll go to Mecca in a couple of weeks. I think the third or the fourth. I think it's the third, Friday the third. I'll be doing Mecca. Let's continue here. Wrong mistake. Oh, darn it. Let me just disappear. Yeah, let me fix my slide here. Let's hope I got this right. Okay, isnad. An isnad is in the science of tradition, the chain of authorities, the sanad, going back to the source of tradition, an essential part of the transmission of a tradition. These references are from the Encyclopedia of Islam, which is the gold standard academic source, even used by Muslims in universities all over the world. It costs about $40,000 to buy a copy of this. So, no, I didn't buy a copy. Anyway, Isnad, Ali, literally a high Isnad, right? Where there are few links between the transmitter and the prophet, or between him and a certain authority, right? This is valuable. And then you have Isnad Nazil, a low Isnad, and so on. There are many, many versions. Goldziher viewed Isnad as a secondary attempt at justifying the traditions that particular people cited during their controversies. So lies they made up to defend their positions. My daddy said that. No, no, no. My daddy said that. Right. The only relevant factor in evaluating the provenance or the source and credibility of hadith was its matan, the content, and not its isnad. He rejected the isnads, and so have many scholars. He was a strong believer in the view that Islamic law owes its origins to Roman law. I don't think that's true at all. But in the opinion of Patricia Crone, his arguments here are uncharacteristically weak. I'd agree with that. Edward Said, one of the more modern scholars, you'll find him on YouTube these days, right? In his book, is it? No, no, different guy. Sorry, I'm thinking of Gabriel Reynolds, Said Reynolds. Sorry, my bad. Edward Said's book Orientalism has renewed interest in Ignaz Goldziher's works. Said himself regretted not paying enough attention to Goldziher's contributions. And of 5 major Orientalists, he remarked that 4 of them, despite their clarity of language, their scholarship, were hostile to Islam. Goldziher was not hostile to Islam. Goldziher liked Islam. So we're not talking about a hostile source. We're talking about someone that actually spoke well of Islam. Any comment before I go on?
Yeah, that's a good point because they will obviously say he's against Islam, but yeah, he's not, he as you said he's for Islam and speak good of Islam. So yeah, they can speak against that.
Yep. So let's continue. Yeah. So I'm going to go for a couple more slides, right? Before my throat gives out. But hopefully you guys are learning something useful. Hopefully this is giving you an insight into Islam. And this is we're looking at Western scholars. We're going to look at Muslim scholars. There's no agreement. So clearly these sources are not reliable. And also you cannot trust the Muslim sources. So then they speak of the traditional critical approach, inaugurated by Goldziher, right? So we've already discovered this. So Goldziher demonstrated convincingly that many of the hadiths, far from being authentic sayings of the Prophet, could only be understood as reflections of later agendas, later interests, right? So these are political, religious, and social interests of the Islamic community during the first several centuries, right? And these hadiths and their chains, their isnads, he says, these are utterly fabricated, forged, unreliable. Only the matan, the actual wording, is in any way reliable. So now the mere allegation that some hadiths were later fabrications was not of much note. Muslim scholars had for centuries recognized the problem of fabricated hadiths. You have multiple categories of hadiths. You've got the sahih, um, you've got the what's the second category? The authentic.
Hassan.
Um, sorry, Hassan.
Hassan.
Yeah, Hassan.
I don't.
Then you've got Da'if,
Is
and
it
you've got
Hassan?
other categories.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hassan. Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 or 7 categories of hadith. There's like matruk, and there's others, right? So even Muslim scholars openly acknowledge they are fabricated hadiths, and then they even argue over whether a hadith is fabricated or sahih, reliable completely, or whether it's sahih. They argue about that. I've already discussed that. Actually, maybe I should bring that up. Do you think it might be relevant for me to bring this up? I'm going to go to the Fath al-Bari. So I'm going to bring this up. This might be relevant to us here. So I'm going to go to the Fath al-Bari. This is the main Tafsir Sahih Bukhari, the Fath al-Bari. This is the main source Muslim scholars use to discuss Sahih Bukhari. I'm just going to go here to this reference. Now, this is a work that is a combination of scholars from Al-Azhar University, which is the most oldest and most respected Islamic university in the world, the guys that created the 1924 Quran, the most famous Quran in the world. So they are the authority on the Quran, as well as Medina University, which is the city of Mohammed, and these two collaborated to create a new version. And they said removing weak hadith from works was not the example of the scholars. So scholars did not remove weak hadith from works because they were actually considered authentic. Otherwise, Imam Ibn Hajar would not have included them himself in Fath al-Bari as sources to take knowledge from. Weak hadiths are sources of knowledge. Weak hadiths are used to support opinions because a weak hadith containing the words of Muhammad is preferred over pure opinion and personal reasoning. This is the example set by all the scholars, including Imam Bukhari. Imam Bukhari used weak hadith deliberately in his work Al-Adab al-Mufrad. We only know of the Sahih Bukhari, but he wrote numerous other collections of hadith, including the Adab al-Mufrad. The Sahih of Imam Bukhari is a collection of the Sahih hadith specifically. It is not a collection of the only hadith that scholars use. The scholars state a Sahih hadith has a 99% to a 100% chance of being entirely accurate. So if the sirah is 100% accurate, then the earth did open up to swallow Muhammad's poop. It did close and let off a beautiful, beautiful, amazing perfumed fragrance. The trees did walk behind Muhammad. The trees did surround him and cover him when he took a dump, because it's Sahih. A Hassan hadith has an 85% to a 99% chance of being entirely accurate. Da'if hadith, a 45 to 85% chance of being entirely accurate. Even a fabricated hadith has a 45% chance of being accurate. The grading it was given may have been wrong, or the fabricator may have spoken the truth in this example. So weak hadith should not be treated like fabricated hadith, because an 85% chance of being accurate is a very high chance. If you received 85% on your test scores, would you throw that out saying that isn't worth anything? Your thoughts, TDK.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing, and most of the Muslim, they don't know this, and that's why the weak hadith is still within the collections of hadith, because they can't just throw it out. It could have been as the percentage is showing of the accuracy. So yeah, weak hadith doesn't necessarily mean it's weak. It's just that they're uncertain of its reliability of being 100% accurate. So yeah, weak hadith is still considered hadiths to the Muslims.
Yeah, they're still authentic. They quote them in the Sharia, for instance. Now, for instance, Noah corrects us here, and he's right. He's 100% correct. But actually, 99% is not 100%. So Sahih Hadith are still not trustworthy in Islam. We only believe in 100% true Hadiths. So yeah, if you guys don't mind handing over those 100% true Hadith books, and we can get started on what's authentic in Islam, and that'll help a lot. But yeah. So Muhammad taking a bath in a well full of garbage, dead dogs, poop, pee, and menstrual clothes, that was the truth. Or cloths. Yes, that was the truth, Conitiendo. So there we go. Let's continue. I'll finish with this. So in other words, so it says here, right, what made Goldziah's research significant was the fact that he had relied for evidence only on the collections of supposedly sound hadiths, many of which he showed to be forgeries. He called into question the reliability of all of the hadiths and the authenticity of isnads as record of a hadith's origins and transmissions, not to mention the methods employed by Muslim scholars to evaluate the reliability of hadiths. It's all garbage from top to bottom. So I'll finish on slide number 25. Okay. So the tradition evolved over time. So the Islamic narrative evolves over time. It shows the impact of political, theological, social, and other issues that were important not at the time of the event the accounts are supposedly describing, supposedly during the life of Muhammad, but at some time later when the tradition was being transmitted. So in other words, we're now in the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s. Muslims are arguing over a point on social, political, or religious matters. So what they do is they write a tradition that they put in the 7th century and say, but Muhammad did this, Muhammad's companions did that. And that is how the tradition gets created. They redact it back and then claim this is support for my political or social position or religious position. So he says there does exist a kernel of historical fact lodged inside the hull of accumulated traditional material. So it's based on some kind of historical detail. So we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but we've got to understand it for what it is. So yeah, it's all garbage. Any comment before we go on?
No.
So they say here, isnads are found not only in hadiths. Now we know that the isnads are unreliable, but isnads are not found only in the hadiths, but also in the sirah. So therefore, even the sirah is questionable. Again, doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, but these isnads are not reliable. Yeah, 200 years later shows it's a fabrication. Again, as the scholars are saying, Sale of Gold, it's because of there's political reasons that the empire is developing. They need to develop law. They need to develop religious practice. They've got to develop social customs. So yeah, they've got to rally around the flag. So they've got to say, well, Muhammad did that, therefore we should do it. And they made it up as they went. Interesting about the position on hadith is the 12 Shia are the only ones who accept Sahih Marfu, the ones that goes directly to Muhammad. Shouldn't all do this? None of it makes sense. But yeah, whatever. Okay, final slide for today. Critique of the Skeptical Approach. That's the title here in the book. But traditional critical research has conclusively demonstrated the existence in Islamic tradition of a heavy overlay. This is a mixing in of legend, of pious legend, and manipulations, distortions, and fabrications of all kinds, tampering with tradition. So we don't know where exactly the truth lies. And the scholars have repeatedly reshaped and redacted the material. So while authentic material on Islamic origins may be found in these sources, there is no way to distinguish the authentic from the fictional. We cannot use Islamic sources to reconstruct Islamic origins, right? So you've got heavily redacted and hence false image of Islamic origins, all authentic evidence for the true nature of which has been purged from the tradition. In other words, they've purged the uncomfortable and rewritten the sources. Your comment before I finish here.
Yeah, and this is also why their scholars cannot agree with each other. Like you will find each of them disagreeing with each other, and it's based on agendas.
Yeah, guys, for those of you who are curious, that thing on the hadiths, the authenticity of the hadiths, that's in the Fat al-Bari, right? This is on page 12 of this Fat al-Bari. It's called the Fat al-Bari excerpt in English. So hold on. So this is it here. If you go to my archive, my Google archive, you'll find it. Just go back up. Here it is. The Fat al-Bari. Look for this, right, in my Google archive. Right, for those of you who got the link, I did not add that to the stream. Unfortunately, I'm setting up a new streaming setup. So the Fat al-Bari. So you can look for that, but you can find it online. Look up Fat al-Bari, and that's on page 12, which explains exactly the authenticity of the hadiths. So we have to accept Islam on faith. Muslims have to accept Islam on faith since there is no surviving evidence. And credible historical information has been purged from the tradition and it's been replaced with myths and legends. So tradition abounds in contradictions and evidence of redaction, evidence of editing, evidence of tampering. Your thoughts, final word. PDK, son, we'll end here.
Yeah. So we can see from everything, the conclusion is that Islam is really, really reliable. It's such a reliable sources. And I'm going to quote one of the reliable source of Islam. Mohammed says that Islam faith will go back and shrink as a snake go back into its hole. So with all this information, definitely Islam is going back into its hole. And if they want to say this is daif, this is sahih, which they will say daif, or they will say, oh, it's another explanation behind of it and all this stuff. But yeah, it's just a bunch of fabrication and unreliable sources.
No. Very unreliable sources. So the sirah is not regarded as a primary source for Islamic jurisprudence. That's fascinating stuff. See, we learn something new every day. Muslim scholars recognize the issues associated with sirah and openly acknowledge them. And they also use them, and they also disagree with each other. So why should we agree with tashfin if the Muslim scholars say otherwise? These are sahih. So the scholars that you like because you because you're embarrassed, you will refer to the scholars that say that this is unreliable. But of course, on the things that you like, you'll turn to the scholars that call it reliable. So yeah, yeah. Do you have the cleanest poop source? Yeah, that's in that's in the sirah. Look up the. It's either in the, my golly. It's either going to be in. Hold on. Look in my sirah, but you're going to look at the Ashifa. Look at the Ashifa by Qadi Iyad. So if you want the whole clean poop source where Muhammad has poopies that smell like ice cream and roses, look for the Ashifa by Qadi Iyad. You don't have to find it in my archive. You can find it anywhere. The Ashifa by Qadi Iyad. You'll find it there. Yeah, it's a scam. So a lot of no, we'll not talk about that now. So okay, yeah. So anyway, guys, so that hold on, I'm not sharing my screen, so that didn't come up. But let me just bring that up for a moment. The Ashifa by Qadi Iyad. Just looked it up. Fath al-Bari is the one source for the Hadiths, and Ashifa by Qadi Iyad. That's where we'll find all of the miracles of Muhammad. That's just one source. I will show you one more source. Let me just bring that up. 300 miracles. Okay, I'm going to bring up this source so you guys can see it. This is a book called The 300 Authenticated Miracles of Muhammad. I will be quoting this book in the next episode when we discuss this, and we're going to look at these miracles that are not in the Quran, by the way, missing from the Quran, but legit. Like Muhammad, like they need to build some defensive stuff. So Muhammad, he takes a hammer, right, and he hits this rock that's 3 times his size. It's 3 times bigger than him, and he hits the rock, and Allah blesses him, and the rock turns to sand. Because yeah. So 300 authenticated miracles of search for this on Google, otherwise look in my archive. So yeah, any final words? So let's we can call it a night. But so yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So
Yeah,
that's
these
basically that.
so-called miracles, they don't even have a point. Like, what? Yeah, like what's the point of it? But yeah, like as we see, it's unreliable sources. They're just fabricated and heavily edited, as we see. And yeah, unreliable sources.
Yep. They bluntly claim Muhammad had more miracles than any other prophet in history. More miracles than any other prophet before him. So yeah, so guys, we'll discuss more about this. We'll have a look into the sirah. We'll look at what these sources actually say. And he split the moon and nobody saw. That's because he did it at night and you were sleeping. Like, come on, Jet Set. Like, come on. You were sleeping when it happened. Next time, be awake when it happens and you'll see it. Voila. You know. So guys, thank you very much. Thanks for the support, for the donations. Thank you, TDK, for joining us, guys. I hope you've learned something. I hope this has been helpful. And this is information that is academic. It is well supported. It even shows the contradictions from Islamic scholars. They can't agree on these sources. These are fake sources. Islam is falling apart at the seams, and we need to make this well known. We need to make this information famous. Yep. So, guys, thank you very much. I wish you all a wonderful day further ahead, or a wonderful night, and see you guys soon for the next stream. Take care. God bless.